Thanks for coming, everybody. So we're going to talk about streaming TV UX seasonality. The idea being that in an ideal world, you would just have buzzy content to throw in front of people all the time, and you wouldn't really have to try all that hard with your UX to kind of keep people on board, keep them engaged. But what happens when you're in a lull, and how can you kind of tailor your user experience to keep people engaged with your service? So I guess I'll do a little intro first. My name's Jared Newman. I've been a technology journalist for 16 years now, which is also the time that I cut the cable TV cord. And I started 2008. So I started writing a streaming TV cord cutting column in 2014 and a newsletter called Cord Cutter Weekly in 2016. I have about 35,000 people who get that every Friday. And do a quick intro for you guys.
My name's Ajay. I'm the CEO of Norigin Media. I'm from Norway. We're a company that builds all your UI UXs that's required to make your streaming happen across mobiles to smart TVs. We're the ones who would fight with Samsung and Roku for you. And we'd work with people who want to design something that seasonally changes.
Great.
Hi, I'm Abhishek Nagaraju. I'm a Vice President of Product at PlutoTV. I help manage the content discovery experience of PlutoTV.
Jason Williams. I lead our UX team at Plex. And of course, Plex is a discovery and streaming platform. A little unique from probably a lot of the other streaming platforms.
Sure. Bruno. So I work at NPAW. We do video intelligence. 360, but I do focus on digital experience intelligence that covers users' behavior from the moment that they log in, all the content discovery process, user journeys, consumption, binging, preferences, personalization, and so on. And basically everything from a data perspective, and we analyze platforms that have seasonality.
Cool. So this is a 40-minute panel. We'll keep it kind of loose and see how things go. If y'all feel like you want to answer or ask some questions at the end, we can do that. I thought maybe we'd start by just kind of talking about like, why should we be thinking about this now? Like, is it, are subscribers or viewers kind of more sensitive, more prone to hopping between services? Is there, I feel like I've seen things about pulling back in content investment. So is there anything that kind of gives this some new urgency in terms of thinking about how you tackle retention in your UX?
I think when you think of content in general, I think of a supermarket, right? So there's a niche and small one, and there's a big and large one. And I think that there's space for all. And when you think of them, there's products that do well, and there's products that don't do well. And sometimes they need to be promoted a little more than the other. And this happens with a lot more of business that comes alongside it. Commercials, the ones who have the biggest amount of money would be put up front. Or if your quality is that good and you're a viral trend, you'll be put up front again. And I think that's the essence of how I would look at a video store. That would get yourself up front, and that tells you how UX and UI needs to be designed for itself.
Yeah, I don't think it's a new problem, so to speak, Jared. I think in general, there's a saying that content is king, right? Like, but there is always a sense of, at least now, for sure, there's a lot of choice out there when you think about content. So seasonality or the plethora of choice just adds an aspect of there's so much choice. So you kind of do need to jump between services because your needs might not be served on one service. So when you think about retention, you think about why this is an important topic. I don't think it's a new topic at all, especially when you think about entertainment. There's always a seasonal aspect to it. When you're trying to monetize as a streaming service. So kind of keeping the user in the center of all of it becomes really critical. Mm-hmm. Content might be king, but then the user is kind of the emperor, right? Like you have to kind of build around what the user's needs are. So that doesn't change. I don't think it's a new problem in any way. But it is a problem that definitely I think has accentuated over the last few years with just how much choice is out there for a user.
I think you just also have to be prepared to be creative. So as seasons, change, you may have to kind of shift your focus, whether that's, promotional areas, the type of artwork you use to focus what is currently in season. For us, we also look at taking opportunities for, I think, we talked about this a little bit earlier. We'll push trailers up higher in our content display, and with the primary CTA to be like adding those items to your watch list. So at least we can continue to have the user engaged, looking for things that maybe are in production or have just hit a streaming service, so that we kind of get future value out of that, and we create value for the user. So as soon as it is available to them, we can notify them. So I think it's really just starting to spin your head and not just always be focused on doing things the exact same way all year long. You have to be able to adapt your UI, adapt your imagery, how you approach messaging. So.
Yeah. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I do think I do agree. It's not a good, new problem, but I do think that we have new possibilities and new capabilities right now, which bring us new ideas as well. So the thing on talking about retention, so retention somehow relates to how the user is perceiving the value that they find in the platform, and well, in the past, if we offer the same platform for all the users, well, they won't perceive the same value, so each one has its own preferences, then we have personalization. And I think that seasonality or adapting to the user's consumption is also something that can keep attractive to the users. So by adapting to the moments or the context in time, so adapting personalization to each context can also, in a way, increase the value that you are offering to each user.
Yeah. Now, I sense that you guys are all connoisseurs of streaming services. So, I mean, and I want to get to maybe the trailer example is an example of this. But, is there, when you look at the streaming services that are out there, kind of low-hanging fruit that's maybe not being addressed enough in terms of like how you can refine things to keep people more engaged when you don't have that buzzy content up front?
How do you keep people engaged with either a fancy app or good content? And I think the idea of being engaged is by watching something continually for 21 minutes, 45 minutes, rather than browsing an app for 45 minutes, trying to find content, being frustrated as hell at the end of it, and not finding what you want. I flew an 8-hour flight. I didn't watch a thing, because, it was, I don't know. I just couldn't. I just didn't find anything. I also fly a lot, and I saw the same old thing over and over again. But I just think that the idea of engaging somebody is not forcing that onto them. And I tell a lot of our partners and our companies, you're not trying to include an animation just because you think that you have a puppy as a consumer who wants an attention to be looking at things that move. It needs to work, and people need to find what they look for, or discover things that they don't know that they like, if that makes sense.
To me, when you think about bad UX, I think it's more to do with a death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's not this, you don't have this one big feature, or you don't have this one big thing that you just go and build because somebody else did it, or you feel like this is the silver bullet that's going to help improve the engagement on a service. It's really important to find the user where they are and solve for their needs. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times, low-hanging fruit is just really finding out where is the user running into a problem, right? Now, for example, in recent times, what's happened is a lot of users are browsing for content on the device's operating system, right? So if you look at kind of the evolution of operating systems over the years, it went from, here are all the apps that you have that you can open on our service, to here is content that you can browse that is available across all of these different applications. So it is important that you update your user journey, so to speak, where you're making it as easy for those users to get to whatever job that they're trying to get to, right? So for example, if somebody found a piece of content that is available on PlutoTV on like a Roku home screen or an Amazon home screen, how easy can you make it? They don't really care if it's on Pluto or if it's on another service. What they want is a great experience, and they want to be able to watch that piece of content. So really looking into where I can optimize that user's journey and get them to the main thing that they're trying to do, which is watch that piece of content, I think is critical. Now, there are different things that we need to add as, let's just say, friction points or things that we need for being a viable business, right? Like getting as much information about the user and being able to monetize them over the long term. But I think the key is how do you keep them engaged? Because that's the first thing that a user needs to do on a streaming service. So I don't know if it's a silver bullet feature, so to speak. I think low-hanging fruits to me is constantly monitor your user's journey and see where you can optimize it, right? And a lot of times it's one of those things that I think teams neglect or are always looking for that brand new feature, that next exciting feature, and you forget that a user is just trying to do simple things and maybe bad UX is getting in the way.
I want to dig into that a little bit more because I think Pluto and Plex are both kind of good participants in that, like, you know, home screen aggregation thing that Roku and Amazon and everybody is doing now. And so maybe you can take me through, like, what things have you done? So let's say somebody finds a movie or show that they like when they're surfing the Fire TV home screen. Like, what have you done to kind of, okay, they watch that show, how do you keep them engaged with your service instead of just dumping back out home and going to the next thing?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One is we do kind of our own ads, and we've experimented a lot in that. So we've done everything from showing other content that's going to be available on the platform, highlighting features for, say, the first 15 to 20 seconds before they engage with the content, and just trying to build some brand awareness. So when they see that app when they open Roku, they're like, oh, well, that's where I watched that great piece of content, and I saw this had these two other things, so I'm going to open that back up. That's obviously one strategy when you're talking about catalog integration. The other thing is wherever possible, try to explain your value of your product, right? It's not just about Plex or Pluto or, every product has a unique value, or it should, that they're trying to bring to the user. And how can you communicate that quickly so that you're finding the right customer fit for you? So that's where I would focus.
Yeah, I think expanding on that, right? When you look at what Pluto has done, going back to your question on what do you do to keep them in the ecosystem, right? A big part of it is how do you use the queue of what they've come in with. So if they come to watch a specific piece of content, how do you continue that viewing session with more relevant content that's being presented to them, right? You can call it personalization, it's maybe quasi-personalization. At that point, you might not have as much information to be as intelligent as you want to be in the first few sessions, but you basically need to find ways to expose your catalog, but in the right way, where, especially with Pluto, where we have 18,000, 20,000 titles, right? It's important to bring them in, kind of handhold them into the experience. So if they've come in to watch a specific piece of content, at the end of it, how do you show more relevant content which is maybe alike to what they're watching? Or if you have historical data about that user, how do you keep them in the ecosystem by showing more personalized, again, relevant content, but more to do with based on their historical consumption behavior within the platform. So I think it goes to catering TV for you, versus just dumping them into this huge catalog of content where you're putting all the onus on the user to go browse and find more things to watch.
And I believe you guys are the same, but it's also an approach of do some platforms require authentication or not? Like for us, we're going to, you had mentioned earlier, get them to the content as quickly as possible, and then figure out how to optimize getting them to be a real customer.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of put a little finer point on it, because you mentioned, Jason, like some pre-roll kind of things, and how do you surface that stuff without annoying people? Like, where's the line? Because from my perspective, it's like if I click on a thing and then it shows me a pre-roll for other things on your service, I'm just annoyed, right? I just want to watch the thing that I came in to watch, and then maybe after, you have a very limited opportunity, especially if I haven't used your app before, to kind of keep me on board. So how do you?
Yeah, so one, keep them short, right? One thing that we've learned is, for those, don't get greedy. You need to, keep that bucket in, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever you can possibly do. We do know that it has helped with retention, getting users to come back through experimentation. But I really think, be cautious that you're not necessarily pushing an agenda, but more trying to build awareness of what the platform is capable of, or what content it offers. And then, you're not necessarily going to do that on repeat visits. You may do it, periodically as you have something new to kind of teach the user.
Okay.
I think sometimes we just need to give the benefit that our consumers are intelligent. 100%. I find it funny because, when you go into a library, you might see an ad for one book. You don't need to see an ad for 1,000 books. You don't need to shove everything in a consumer's face. People will find and search things. The things that we're a technology company, so what we look at is how old and horrible is a Samsung 2017. I really hope that no one's here from Tizen, but it's horrible, to look for something and to search and type from a remote control is a devious task. But then to make it simple, to make sure that an app is simple on an older device, an app is, you can do more things on an app on a newer device, that's something that you need to think about. The idea is that we've been all used to using a mobile phone to find and look for content that we want. It's more difficult on a smart TV or a CTV, which is not a personal device. More than one person should be able to use that particular device, which means that if I'm watching a particular show and if there's no profiles or if there's a possibility of making sure that you're still giving me the chance to find something new or recommending one thing which I might like or not like, I don't need to rely on your recommendation alone. I should be able to find or discover or search things.
I want to add on that. I think that's a really, really important point. I think the line that you're mentioning, Jared, that's an evolving line, right? Customers' expectations change. When they know, for example, Pluto is a free TV service, and that's well known by the Pluto user, right? So there is a certain openness to ads because they understand that that's the price of free TV, right? So to your point on how do you make sure it's not annoying, I think that's an evolving line. And the annoyance is, it's a scale, right? Like sometimes they're okay with a lot of ads, but as to Ajay's point, you don't need to show 1,000 ads in a library, but I think what is critical is building an ecosystem that allows you to constantly iterate and test and find out what that line is, because it's not a constant line. So if you have a solution today, that might change in 6 months because of just the ecosystem that the user is in, right? Because entertainment is not just TV right now, it's everything, right? Like all of your social media apps are showing us a lot of ads. If you kind of look at how the experience has changed, there's a lot more ads that you see on your social media apps today as well. So I think it's an evolving space, and it's important to continuously iterate and set your service up to be able to experiment and get to that champion as quickly as possible.
I will back that 100%. Be prepared, as a product design team or UX team or product, when you're kind of, putting some of this stuff together, build the infrastructure out early on to experiment and be able to measure, because it is always changing. I mean, this industry over the last 2 years has, made 3 or 4 turns, and, it continues to do so. So you've got to be willing to adapt, and the only way you can do that is to have the knowledge to do so.
Also on the annoyance and how we show things, I believe that we are capable right now to make sure that we are showing relevant things to the users. So we used to work a lot with personalization and recommendations on each lane, positioning content to what's more relevant. But right now we can really adapt to what's being presented to each user. We are working right now, for instance, with segmentation and the adaptable UX for the segments. So you can position what's more relevant to that segment up, and then you order, of course, with recommendations. So that kind of, it's a service in a way for the user. So you get happy, and you see that the time to video reduces, the amount of searches reduces as well. So if you position the content based on what you learn from the users.
It's kind of a good segue into, we were talking about maybe kind of dynamic UI changes. So jumping back into the situation where you have the user already. They already use your app. They've opened your app. They're looking for something, but you don't have that, Squid Game season 2 or whatever it is that drew them in specifically. And so how can you kind of adapt your app on the fly to reflect maybe the lull in content, and how do you bring up stuff they might be interested in?
Sorry.
No, good for it.
I think, first of all, machine learning recommendations have existed for more than 10 years. And I think that linking it by definition of a name of a show and a genre is already workful. It does the job. But it doesn't mean that just because you like, Anne Boleyn, you'd like the Elizabeth show as well, right? So it can get irritating if you overdo it. There's a science to it today. AI is a word and exists, and people should learn over a period of time. And there is a user who would watch a particular genre and then watch something else, or time of day, time seasonality, whether it's summer or winter, or I don't know what season really means in this context. Is it, morning, noon, and night, or Valentine's Day? So there is an aspect to it which the science isn't rocket.
Yeah, so I think, we talk about artificial intelligence in the context of, content and our platforms a lot here. It's typically the recommendation engines, but I think kind of what I was alluding to is that it's more than just what content is there, it's how you present it. And I think we're definitely moving toward a world where, in say Valentine's Day, you may want to lead with big, wide heroes, and that can kind of express the emotion and are using colors of Valentine's. During the NFL season, you may want to present content for that row very differently. So I think one of the areas that we're heavily invested in is dynamically, changing the UI to adapt to not only the season, but even the user. So the type of user that it is, some users want, a big grid of just posters, and others want, less is more, like just kind of focus on giving me 5 things to choose from. And I think you will see that become a lot more common over the next 5 years as AI and UX kind of continue to intertwine.
It's pretty interesting because, for one thing, like think of Netflix, they just announced a big, redesign. Everybody's going to have that design.
It's beautiful, by the way.
Yeah. But also, like, if I go to my wife's Netflix, it's completely different in terms of the content that's there. So I mean, you're saying that in the future, maybe everybody will have not just a different mix of content, but like a different UI based on the preferences.
100%. I mean, if you look, Netflix is already doing this to some level already. Like, they have a handful of different types of components, the way they render content rows, and those may be in different places and feature different things depending on region or the time of day or the type of user that it is. But that's really working through a subset, and I think that's a good start. But if you really look where we're going, AI is already capable of spitting out in real time UIs for through prompts and being able to point it to your design system. I'm jumping way into the future a little bit, but I think you'll start seeing those steps happen where we start looking at adaptive experiences based on the context, and the context might be the user. It might be is it a TV? Is it a phone?
Do you have any examples? Have you started experimenting with that kind of thing yet?
So we are doing some experimenting internally we have a machine learning engine internally that we have kind of 4 or 5 different types of rows, actual different layouts. And, based on engagement, we will actually feed that back into the AI engine, and it will adapt and not only decide what's top and what content should be in there, but how should I display this row?
I think that, your question is more around dynamic UI, Jared, but I think we should always keep UX and UI together, right? And what I mean by that is, I think dynamic UX has a lot more legs, just in my opinion. Going back to the Netflix example, right? If you really dive deep into what they've done, they've reduced the number of sections, which means they're more comfortable with what they are merchandising to a user, and which might mean that they're really leaning in on their machine learning capabilities, because they feel like you can get to the content that you want to with fewer sections versus needing to browse through multiple sections to get to it. So that to me is not necessarily a UI change. Yes, they've reduced the number of tabs and they've reduced the number of screens, sure. To me, that's a UX solution, right? Which is, we were comfortable as a company to dynamically curate an experience to our users' need. So just kind of drawing a parallel for Pluto, for example, we've historically been known as kind of the fast provider, right? But we also have a pretty significant on-demand catalog. And some users tend to want to be more on the on-demand side of the equation. So do you land those users within the EPG? Do you land them on the on-demand experience? Do you land them on the home experience, which is more curated to your needs based on your tenure with the? So I think it also the UX to me is also a lot of is extremely important on. There is an existing paradigm that you have as a service. But that paradigm, the happy path that you have for that paradigm need not be the happy path for every single user. So dynamically changing your UX, I think, is also critical. And there's a lot that a lot of companies can still do. I feel before we go into, really leaning into dynamic UI, so to speak. I think in the end, what is presented is more important than how it's presented.
So have you started doing that where you will land people on the on-demand catalog versus the live based on like what they tend to watch when they?
We don't have a constant experience, so we keep testing. Going back to like it's an evolving journey when you think about a user's journey and what their needs are. So we've tested different drop-in experiences. We have a home experience now within Pluto, which is one personalized to your needs, but also it mixes the best of linear and on-demand in one experience. So you kind of blur the lines between what the industry calls as this is linear TV, this is on-demand TV, right? In the end, it's what do I want to watch something, and that could be a linear channel, that could be an on-demand asset. It's how do you present it to the user, and this goes back to UX, right? How do you present it to the user, and if they're all intermingled, does that cause confusion? From our experience, it doesn't. It actually helps the user engage more with the service because you're blurring the lines between this tabbed approach of go here for on-demand content, go here for live TV, right? It's more for your content needs. Here's one experience that gives you the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of raises the question for me, at least, like, you start changing things, how do you do that without kind of overwhelming or confusing the user, and where do you draw the line?
I think it's not confusing a user, it's irritating a user, right? So I think when you talk about engagement, there is an invasive engagement aspect to it. We've done, CTV is the buzzword for the last couple of years, and we're trying to figure out how do you, make people start their video journey from the bigger screen at home. Mobile is a device where there's a lot of engagement by definition because of it being a personal device, but on CTV, we've tried so much. We've done, we spoke about this when we had a call where we said we did Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or Idol, and you could vote either on your mobile phone or on your CTV device and remote, but the remote is a horrible gadget, right? So, but you also don't want everybody to vote. You want to give them the choice of being able to do so without being invasively covering up the screen and making sure that you're not watching what you want to watch. So to be able to do that, when we did that for the first time last year in Sweden, we saw that 50% of the total people who actually voted on Idol used the remote control versus the mobile. It wasn't cannibalizing each other. There was a new audience. There's an audience who wants to use a device that's already there, a single experience. And then there's an audience who's used to having an app because they have it. So, you're giving them the choice of using it. You're just making the choice more abundant to the user. As long as it's not invasive and you're not popping it up in the middle of the screen saying, click here to vote. I don't want to vote sometimes, darn it.
But again, it's about adapting, right?
Yeah, and if you actually use tools like NPAW has, and actually, I think the data's there, but one of those things that I've seen when we validate those integrations, we see, God, there's so much data there, but do people actually use it, observe it, understand that, there's a reliance off that data, then to make sure that the loudest person screams in a company who makes sure that their volume is heard is another thing, right? Because then comes...
I think that's where adaptive experiences can help, though, right? This goes back to, does this person do better with, seeing 4 items on screen?
Right. For sure.
Or does this person want tons of choice? I mean, we are heading to a world that is, people are going to have high expectations on personalized experiences. I mean, your relationship with your AI, whether you're ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, you're starting to see like people have this history in the way that you're kind of engaging, and the world is moving toward a very personalized kind of experience for you. And to think that, TVs and our streaming apps are not going to evolve to, fall in line with that. I think you have to just know that's where it's going.
This may be a bit of a tangent, but is there like a downside to that? I mean, maybe the monoculture is already kind of dead. I think there was a talk about that earlier, but if it's getting to the point where everything is so personalized, like, are we losing something? Is there something to be said for kind of like looking at data about what the majority wants and kind of like pushing people toward a certain thing that's kind of for everybody?
It's a balance.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the short answer is yes, because and something, especially on the Pluto side, one of the things that we've focused on is keeping that curated by human aspect to our service, because I think that is important. There is a certain fatigue at times on here's a recommendation, here's what we think you will like to watch, right? I think there is it goes from there's so much of it that's happened, and I think a user wants the ability to kind of break away from that mold a little bit. But to me, that is part of recommendations, right? That is another recommendation which is not driven by an engine at that point. So I think it all goes back to really knowing your user's need and kind of keeping your service updated, like what Bruno was saying earlier, right? It's how do you adapt to users' needs? And there is data that says that we've seen, I'm sure we've all seen over the years, where when you personalize content, there was a time where you were able to increase engagement because it was helping in creating a behavior for the user where showing relevant content, or because you watch this, you would like that, based on all the models that we have, has worked. But there are also times where you have to pivot from that. And to your point, how do you use what's happening in the zeitgeist to your advantage, right? Mm-hmm. And get people in a way to watch something that mimics appointment viewing in the old days, where everybody would tune in at a certain time because a big show was coming on. So I think there's a mix. It's a balance, as Jason was saying. But it goes back to just, you need to know what your users' needs are, and you need the ability to quickly pivot and adapt to what those needs are.
I think one of those things that I fail to understand in this industry is how much knowledge we know about each of these services, the brands and the TVs, and how none of our personal friends and families know the same. My brother, who has a Samsung TV, still calls it a Roku. And I had to Google what the difference between Plex and Pluto is. How many of you know the difference between Plex and Pluto? Right?
Hey.
And I
That's a good number.
What is the cost of this ticket to get here? It's $1,000. That is a very intelligent niche audience, which 40% only knows the difference between Plex and Pluto, who's on stage. Come on. I think that what we need to do is tell the audience what Plex is, and they'll find you. I think it's hard to download the app, and that's Samsung's problem. But I think that just tell them what it is. And I know we need to do ads, and I literally had to do a quick YouTube video to figure out what the difference is. Pluto is...
I don't know where you're going with this.
I am stirring this panel up.
No, this is great.
But I think your point, Ajay, is also, that goes back to building a relationship with your users, right? I think that's an important aspect of it for sure. And I'm sure there's, Pluto and Plex might have a lot more awareness in the US compared to the Nordics, for example, right? Or even though Pluto is available in the Nordics as well.
And just so if I ask a European audience what Pluto is, they talk about on demand. And if I ask, when I say the American European audience, it's a big user base of 3 people in each continent, but it's live channels here and it's on demand in Europe. It's a very different answer.
Which is, I think, going back to the
Why we need dynamic UX.
Is that the reason, or is it marketing?
I think it's all of it. It's a service that does offer both. It's a service that has a strong catalog behind both, at least and I know Plexus as well.
Yeah.
So
we have Pluto content.
Exactly. But I think it goes back to the audience needs are different.
Yeah.
Right. I think there is a certain nostalgia when you think about linear television in the US, and we hear that all the time with Pluto TV. Right. It reminds me of the old days. It reminds me of I turn the TV on and there's something playing. But that might not necessarily resonate with somebody, to your point, in certain countries outside of the US. So I think it goes back to you again, I'm sounding like a broken record, right? But as a product manager, most of the times what the crux of what we try to do is know your user, constantly be in touch with your user, and adapt your service to your user. As long as you have a value proposition to provide to your user, you're in business, right? So I think it goes to that. But I get the problem.
It is difficult, you know. You're using Roku and Samsung to do the job. They're competing with you.
Yep.
You have your own list of channels. They have theirs. There's also a consumer who has a Roku and a Samsung in 2 different rooms in their homes, and they get confused as hell when they turn on both these TVs and they don't know why there's Pluto on one and there's no Pluto on the other. But maybe you fought with Samsung. Yeah. I don't know. So,
well, you said something I do think that is extremely important, and basically, I think we're all kind of trying to express that trying to get the user to understand your value prop is extremely important. Especially you've got to do something different. You've got to bring something unique, and finding ways, to kind of bring it back to UX UI, finding ways to do that throughout the app experience, throughout the journey, is just something I think we all have to pay attention to, so that at the end of the day, the user walks away and goes, okay, not only did I have a good experience, but I understand what this platform offers and what they can do for me.
This is a panel on retention, not just attraction. So I guess we should maybe kind of wind it down a bit by talking about, like, okay, how do you identify somebody who had been using your service and is about to tune out or unsubscribe or just go use something else, and what can you do to kind of pull them back in?
Can I go on? Well, this is so.
This is where NPAW comes in.
Yes, but machine learning is here for so many years. But yes, indeed, right now we have other ways to look at data. And on what Ajay was mentioning we have so much data, is everyone looking at it and so on? So on our side, we are also preparing it. It's not that we are giving up on humans, but we believe that there are some kind of analysis that should not be done by humans. So we should maybe focus on creativity, on editorialization, on making sure people understand our value proposition. And we are structuring it to be understood on the level that we can right now, process data with AI. So one thing that we can do right now, so we used to have the capability to understand, to train a machine learning model to take the churn signals on our platform. So most of the users that churn do that and so on. And right now we can do that at a user level. So you can look at one user and say, this guy will churn because it's taking too much for him to find a content. Or he's not watching enough this type of content. Or he's not doing this or not doing that. So we can be very specific on understanding the signals impacting each user. And the thing is, what we do with it. This on our side, and to be honest, we get limited, and it's frustrating at some point, because we can say, hey, these are the most influencers. This segment is being influenced for this and this and that. And then you can look at the data and plan your actions. But we see some limitations from the services on acting with agility to work on the retention. I don't know how is it for you guys.
Yep.
To be able to be data driven on that.
Yeah, and I think it's different for every company. What does how are you measuring retention? For us, what activities matter. So we know that you're not always necessarily coming to Plex to watch a title. You may be, at a movie theater, see a trailer, want to add something to your watch list, or, so there are key activities that actually end up providing more value long term. I think, whatever you kind of, whether it's AI or you have like some key metrics that you're looking at to kind of determine what, the signals for churn for your product. I really do think it's about how do you re-engage this user without being gross. Like, how can you really, display value, and so that you're reminding them. And it goes back to the kind of the value proposition. But one example for us might be that continuing to provide you push notifications if something has gone that was on your watch list. Is now available on one of your streaming services. Like, focus on value, and you can actually reach out to the user a lot more than I think people think, as long as you're thinking about the value of the message and what you're doing when you reach out.
Sorry to come in again, but I feel that, well, the communication is something that we used to do a lot, like push notifications, mailing, you know, but maybe the adaptive UI or UX, it's one response that we can work with. You know, the main interaction we have with users is our platform, you know, and so to use it in order to increase retention probably is one path. Right?
I didn't want to jump in because you said, Bruno, that you have data maybe and some of the streamers are maybe not agile enough to kind of work with that data. Can you give me an example of like what you would maybe recommend that they do that's currently hard for them to do today, and if they were more adaptable, they'd be?
Well, it's hard to connect all departments. So it depends on the service. Each one has its own maturity. But if you find out that you have, I don't know, content saturation for some segment, and this is what influencing the churn of this segment, or I don't know, an issue on one segment that is using mostly this device or this platform, and this is impacting their experience, and this is influencing their churn signals. To be able to connect the departments and work on a data-driven way and decide to do the actions to retain those users is what costs most, you know, the time from the services to act, and then when we act, it's kind of too late. So usually we are working with the past, not really to retain the user base, but trying to adapt to increase or reduce our churn rate for the future, not really directly with the users.
I think there are to kind of Bruno's underlying point of using data, right? There is, if you closely track user events as one like very specific piece within the application where you're able to track, you can heat map what a user does. You will start seeing trends of when people bounce from the service, right? Like certain browsing trends where they might open a certain section about, you know, a little, you know, beyond a certain number, and then you start seeing a high correlation between that behavior to churn if you're a subscription service, bounce if you're a free service like us. So there are ways of predicting certain behavior, where it might be, you know, like you were saying, Ajay, of spending 45 minutes trying to browse and find something, right? When that is happening, there are, let's call it dynamic UI methodologies, but it's not that complicated for you to have some logic that says, hey, show this modal when somebody is doing this behavior, right? Where you kind of push them in a different direction that has a higher correlation to not bouncing. So I think this is where that constant tracking of what correlates to bounce behavior, because in the end, I think a lot of times what happens with bouncing or you know, churning in a subscription space is it's kind of after the fact, right? Like this happened, now how do we combat this for the next season? It's a lot of how we sometimes look at it. But there are a lot of things you can do more with leading indicators and try to predict churn. So there's a lot you can do there. I don't think it's as complicated as it seems sometimes. Of dynamic UI seems like such a big thing, right? But going back to Bruno's point, it does require a lot more involvement in going deeper into your data, though.
And you have to address it small pieces at a time, right? There's not a silver bullet for stopping churn. If it's, hey, they're having trouble, you know, finding something to watch, or, you know, maybe there's just a fundamental element. You should have had, you know, easier access to categories, which is something we faced before. Like, you have to kind of address each problem, I think, one at a time.
And the UI doesn't remain within the app. You know, e-commerce is well beyond the website. Yeah. I think a user journey is well outside of where it needs to be. Targeting a person who logs in isn't difficult. It's 2025.
Right.
And I think that when somebody is spending 45 minutes not finding it, when somebody is overwatching TV in the middle of the night, you can address that audience in a particular way, and that's not invasive at all. One of those best companies here in America, Saks. Try shopping some designer clothes there. Bloody brilliant. They make me spend so much more money than I want, because it's the way they interact. And e-commerce this is all digital platforms. And if you see that this is all the same, whether it's watching a video piece of content or you know, shopping something online, that's what a consumer is doing anyway. And you need to correlate those experiences for that consumer experience.
Okay. Well, I think we've plowed through our time slot here. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up that I didn't ask you about, or you think is worth leaving?
I think I'm going to have one long chat with him for about 2 days about the EPG, as to why that's the center of everyone's lives and if it'll remain and what the science of that is, because it's an unanswered question.
I would tell you this, half the people love it, half the people hate it.
I want to meet
the way
that
it
half
works.
who love it, I tell you.
Numbers don't lie, you know.
We'll do an EPG panel next year.
Absolutely, please.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Really appreciate this.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you.
Thank you.